So here we are, the end of another season. Compared with the last few seasons, it feels very well structured, with the serials mostly feeling of a higher quality in terms of their scripts. It's far more Earth focused than even the first season, with all but 2 serials taking place on Earth, which is very different for the show from the past few years. This focus on Earth but keeping the serials very separated in terms of locations helps to build the planet up and give it a larger sense of scale, although 5 serials in a row is a bit much for just Earth. So let's get into the serials and see how they stacked up. The season opens strong with Tomb of the Cybermen, a classic. This is a serial with a legendary reputation, and it's the first fully surviving Triton era serial. This combination of factors gives it a lot to live up to, and bar a few elements that haven't aged well, it does. It's a real step up from the previous Cybermen serials. The Abominable Snowmen is next, and it's a bit of a mixed bag. Of course, missing 5 episodes does hurt it, but it does introduce one of the Doctor's most dangerous enemies. It's a good watch, but it does slow down towards the end. The Ice Warriors followed that up with a very different serial, set in the future when the world is having a climate crisis. The serial instead focuses on aliens who have been frozen for hundreds of years. These 2 elements are used together to push the serial's message, but it does mean that the villains are well fleshed out. It's a good watch and probably stronger on a rewatch. The Enemy of the World was a big change-up, with the serial taking place in the near future, which is now the past. It has a far more action-packed plot, which the budget is able to handle, but it's not the deepest or most interesting, which is unfortunate, but it's still a good watch. The Web of Fear saw the return of the Yeti and the Great Intelligence, and the introduction of one of the show's greatest characters. This serial really stepped up what the series could do with some of its best production values. It's a must-watch even if it's sadly missing an episode. Fury from the Deep is a classic, a complete missing serial which uses that to improve itself. It has one of the most iconic scenes in the early years of the show, and a soundtrack which will creep you out. It also features one of the best character departures in the show, another must-watch. The Wheel in Space was a letdown. It had an interesting idea, great villains, and failed to use any of them well. It does introduce a new companion, but she's not well fleshed out by the story. This is Whittaker's weakest serial so far, but it's not the worst in the show's history. Unlike with previous seasons, the serials in this one are hard to rank. There aren't any I hate, but there are weaker ones. So in last place, probably controversially, we have the Abominable Snowmen, then the Wheel in Space, the Enemy of the World, the Ice Warriors, the Tomb of the Cybermen, the Web of Fear, and in top spot, Fury from the Deep. Although I feel like this is a season where this list could change up easily, as I think anything below Tomb could change up on a dime. So now for the characters, with there being far less than the past few seasons. We only have 3 who are fully fleshed out, due to how late Zoe was introduced. So let's begin with the Doctor. So this is Triton's first full season as the Doctor, and he gives an even stronger performance than last season. While he did settle into the role relatively quickly, he feels like he's hit every beat he needs to hit, with him feeling perfect in the role. The season also gives us some of the Doctor's backstory in a subtle way. Obviously this is the scene where he's talking to Victoria about his family. While he doesn't go into details, it gives us a slight insight into a side of him we've never seen before. His kinder side and nature is on display in this season a lot more than ever before, which really helps him to connect with his companions more. Everything just came together in this season to give us one of the best seasons for the Doctor. Jamie is next, and he's stronger than he was last season. As while there hasn't been the same need to the male companion as with the Hartnell era, he does a great job at leading the more action-packed scenes. Having a male companion in a secondary role to the Doctor at last really changes how the dynamic works, and it feels very original. Compared to the previous season, in this one he's a fully rounded character, and not just an extra thing for the writer to do something with. Across this season he has plenty of moments where he leads the plot, or gets a heroic moment, while at the same time playing second to the Doctor as one of his closest companions. Their dynamic is really strong, basically a comedy act at times with how they interact. Watching him go from basically a nothing character in the previous season to one of the best companions the show has given us is incredible. When compared to his predecessors, he is unique, being the only one of them from the past rather than the modern day or far future, which does make him stand out as someone who really doesn't understand even the modern world, but is growing to understand it. He's still on the back foot to his predecessors, but is perhaps the fastest to understand the world around him despite this. Now for Victoria, who is strong. She is far more interesting than a decent chunk of her predecessors, not because she has the most interesting backstory, but because she is given more time to develop, especially when it comes to her fear. While she does still fill the role of the screaming companion, as I've mentioned a few times, it's worked into her character better. What I mean by this is that while she does scream at scary things, she's also the first one to want to leave when the situation is scary or dangerous. She often approaches things in a fearful way, even when the reason to be afraid is only small. This is different to the brave but then screaming approach the female companions have had so far, and it works well to elevate her fear. She is a very anxious character, and that's what makes her departure so powerful. It hits at the core of this trait and her character, that she enjoys travelling but it's too much for her. It makes her departure so much sadder than almost all the previous ones, and it's perhaps the most bitter so far. Finally we have Zoe, who I don't have much to say about. This is entirely because she's only just been introduced, and her introductory story didn't do much for her. She has definite potential as a character, with her computer-like brain and her lack of humanity, but that's about it to say about her, although she does have the basis of some good dynamics. Hopefully the next season will expand on her and give us a strong companion. So this season overall was a great one. It's almost certainly the strongest season so far. It has made strong serials which both introduced iconic foes or took old ones to the next level. It raised the bar again after the previous season got the show back in shape. But we've got a new producer and script editor going into the next season. So let's see if this new team can keep up the high standards we've become accustomed to over this season. Once again the bar has been raised high, so let's see what the next season has got.